this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Remember to clear me throat first. Now I'm sure everybody gets days when they're really not in the mood, but they carry on anyway. That's what we do. Today I'm going to have a look at some Dendrobiums that are lurking around that haven't bloomed for me, and just sort of go over why. Some of them are just new plants and they haven't come round to their blooming season yet. It's very simple. But we'll have a look at their sort of progress and start putting out some thoughts about how they might go through the winter. Now we do have a problem this year with the winter because I don't know where I will be. So we could be growing in the house where it's difficult to get cooler temperatures. Unknown. And on that front, you'll all be pleased to hear, or not, that the place I went to look at and chatted with the landlord has been taken off the market. Now I phoned the agent, and after quite a few phone calls managed to get through and get somebody to actually answer the phone. But I think there's only two of them in the office and they were probably on the phone, if you see what I mean. Anyway, the reason is based on the current tenants that are in there, one of which is now who is ill with COVID. Now obviously there's a recovery period, and you can go down suddenly with that as well and end up in hospital. I don't think it's going to come to that. But nonetheless, they've got a problem with the property they were buying because it's in a chain. You know, they are the ones below that property. As a renter, they're in a perfect position to buy because they've got nothing to sell. But the people that are selling that one to them have got somewhere to buy. And it goes on. And sometimes you can end up in a property worth 3 million quid right at the top. And they just go, actually, I think we'll stay here. And the whole chain collapses. That's how it works in this country. It's a pain. You don't make a commitment until you exchange contracts, at which point you're obliged and you must go ahead and you agree a completion date. Normally about 3 weeks later, when both parties agree, one goes out, one comes in. So at that point, you know, it's decided. But the solicitors involved won't do those exchanges unless everything's okay. So it just hangs up a lot of the time. The agent said that it will probably come back on the market at a later time when everything's been sorted out. And anybody that's shown an interest, they will phone up to see if they've found something else or whether they're still interested. So, not lost, not gone, but not available. So yeah, so that's that. News on Mum, there's just no change, and it's just beyond belief that she's still hanging on. It really is. It's over 3 weeks now since she had a mouthful of anything, apart from a trickle of water now and again. So it just can't be much longer, it can't be. My sister said you can last 2 months without food as long as you've got supply of water. And I said, yeah, that's if you're fit and healthy, Bear Grylls, you know, woodsman, yeah, not frail, weak, and at 90, nearly 91. We shall see. That's. I've got my coach trip tomorrow, which I don't really feel like going on, but as I organised it, I'm obliged, again, an obligation, you've got to go through with it. And I'm sure once I get there and, you know, people start chatting, and I'm sure I'll be fine. But at the moment, I don't feel like going. But we will go ahead because we have to. That's the way it is. Right, now, some of these orchids may be beyond my access without moving too many plants. So we'll have a go on this shelf first because there is an assortment. Now that's bloomed, well, still in bloom. That's a Latoria type, and it's been potted in such a way that I can keep that quite dry in the winter and just keep enough moisture on those roots to stop those canes desiccating. And that's all the water it will get. It probably won't get any feed through the winter unless it disobeys the rules and starts putting up some new growths during the winter, in which case it'll have to have a bit of food, but it'll be minimal. So that's a Latoria type. That's a Cattleya. Right, so what have we got here then? Another Latoria. This is Roy Tokunaga. I forgot to say what that was. That's a primary cross, that one. That's something. Eximium crossed with Rhodostictum, that one. You can see the rhodostictum in those blooms, definitely. This is an unbloomed one. This is Dendrobium roytocanaga, and it's effectively a replacement. I had that once before, and I like the blooms. So when I saw it available, I thought we'll have that. And it's not a bad plant. It's got a nice new growth coming up the middle there. So obviously, as far as winter treatment on this one is concerned, exactly the same as the previous one. Another Latoria. What else we got up here? There's most of the ones up here are unbloomed, or unbloomed for me anyway. What is this one then? Oh, this is where did this come from? Ah, this came from Jeff's collection, so from Marius effectively. So a little black fly just dashed up that cane. I don't think it's a thrip. That's the last thing we need in here. Yeah. Yes, so this is a Nobile type, Oriental Smile variety Fantasy. Fantasy, spelt with a Z. I wonder if that's a typo. I'm not bothering to look it up. So this is an unbloomed one for me, but it was a duplicate in the collection. It does have a nice new growth coming, and this cane here, which I would suggest is full size, has not actually bloomed. So I suspect this little one here has bloomed. So this one is highly likely to bloom. When it blooms is unknown. Normally a Nobile, late winter, early spring. But it depends where it came from, how long Jeff had had it. This one's had a lot of disruption in its life because it doesn't look big enough for Jeff to have had it very long. So it came from somewhere to Jeff, went from Jeff to Marius, and now it's come from Marius to me, having had a repot in between. So it's a little disturbed. But quite honestly, I can see nubbins already opposite the leaves on here, so I'm confident that's going to bloom. Blooms on that are stunning. So that's a Nobile type. All my Nobile types will get the same treatment. They will get their feed reduced as we go into autumn. And once we get to sort of middle of November sort of time, it's heading towards December, depends on the late autumn weather, the feed will stop and the watering will come right down to just stopping the shrivelling. And with the Nobiles, they will get moved into the brightest place I can find for them because it helps induce the blooms. The temperature in here will drop for everything at night and be maintained on a heater. That last year was 15 degrees. I may keep it at 15. I may go up to 16 this year. I've been going up from 12. Each year I've been going up by 1 to see if the winter resting Dendrobiums still bloom. So far so good. Right, and this one is my only Antelope type. I haven't had this long at all. And this is Tangerinum. Has now been repotted. Didn't have very good roots, but does have a new growth and should produce roots on that growth. This is blooming size, and the cane that would bloom hasn't yet. So it might wait for the new one, it could bloom on the older one. These have similar habits to the Phalaenopsis type Dendrobiums really. They'll push up a new cane but bloom on the previous one as that one matures. But it's not consistent because there's just so many hybrids around, but that's a species anyway. That will get the same treatment as the Latorias because to the best of my knowledge that's about right for them. If you can keep them growing, because where they come from they wouldn't get the cold, if you can keep them growing and keep your temperatures up, then you don't need to worry about resting them. The only rest I would suggest for Latoria types and Antelope types, most Dendrobiums, is when they're not growing. When there is nothing happening, then they don't need lots of feed. And if you've got warm growers and your temperatures are going to drop down, they will slow down or stop and they won't use the food because they're not growing. So that's winter stuff. What else we got up here? This is, that's the Thailand Black, Sarnook Thailand Black. So that's a Phalaenopsis type. Now, that hasn't bloomed for me, but it was in bloom when I got it. And what I've got is 2 nice strong new growths, one here and one here. It has bloomed on this cane. As I said, it was in bloom when I got it. That doesn't mean to say it won't push out another spike on that cane. that cane has also bloomed, that little one. So the two older canes have both bloomed. They could bloom again. Very sturdy, this one, for a Phalaenopsis. Real leathery, you know, rigid leaves on this one. Gorgeous blooms again. I've had them in here, but they weren't mine. So this one has yet to bloom for me. What else we got up here? I've clustered an awful lot of these together, haven't I? Now this is my Alexandriae, and we have a problem because it aborted its latest new growth. It's been repotted now. It got left in its pot a bit too long. It was also in bloom for a very long time with not a lot of backup. You know, there's an old cane here with 2 leaves, a full-size cane with only 1 leaf, the other one's dropped off, and then it's got this growth over here with 2 leaves that hasn't bloomed yet, but does have the nubbin for where a spike would start. So there's no new growths on here, and there is a bit of root activity. So that's a Latoria type of species, Alexandriae. Not doing very well at the moment, but I'm hoping it'll pick up. I've had that one a while now. This one's highly likely to fall over, which will be a pain. Now this one is quite comical actually. This is KO Green, which is a Phalaenopsis type, we think. But looking at where it blooms from, the shape of it, where the leaves start, it's going to be a Phalaenopsis type. Bloomed here 3 times, or 3 canes, 3 spikes, not necessarily separately. That doesn't mean to say it can't produce another one. And then this is my growth, which is an absolute stonker. Currently a fraction taller than the previous big one. So yay, we're winning. Good set of leaves on here and still growing at this point in time. And from that new growth we now have a pot full of roots. But what we also have is a plant that is incredibly difficult to stand up. Really top heavy, that one. And unbloomed. This one came from Jeff's collection. So we don't know, but with a name like KO Green, I would suggest it's going to have some green in the blooms, if not a green bloom. But Phalaenopsis type that. So, right, and then there's one more Dendrobium up here, and then I might have to shut the camera off while I put all these back. Actually, there's a second one up in the corner that keeps getting forgotten. Now this is the Aussie's Sweetness crossed with Tapiniense, and it's a Latoria. I was just going to say, I still haven't made my mind up what sort this is, but it's got to be a Latoria type, looking at the size and shape of the canes, number of leaves on the top, 2 or 3, so that rules out Phalaenopsis type, doesn't it? Because that tends to have at least 5, 6 or even 7. So a pair of leaves on the top, in the main, sometimes 3. Are there any with 3 on there? No, they're not actually, they're all pairs. And canes that are relatively narrow at the bottom and then get fatter towards the top and thin out again where the leaves come out. And bloom straight out of the apex, first time round, and some will bloom again from the apex and actually have another go. Sorry, I've got an obsession at the moment. Every plant I pick up gets studied for obvious flipping reasons. I'll stop there as I've got a little break there. Okay, so that's Latoria type, so we've already covered how those will get treated. I'm looking forward to see how big that new growth is actually going to get, because it's enormous. We shall see. Right, have a bit of coffee. It's getting dry. Oh, that's still hot. I've got black coffee today. I run out of milk, and the shopping's getting delivered tonight with milk, so I'm blowed if I'm going to go out and get some when I don't have to. It's raining today, on and off, but you know, drizzly dull day today with the odd outburst. Right, now I have been sent via email a recipe for scale that has come. Well, there's another email from the same person with a video attached to it, with the person from the company showing the ingredients of the recipe and mixing it up and how it gets used. Now this is I was going to say non-chemical, but it's a half and half, but it's a soap type wash, and this comes from, hell's the company called? I'll do a pop-up, but it's an actual company that you know, that it's a reputable sort of company as far as I can tell anyway. And basically it's two types of soap. Now, as soon as you get into these this hippie stuff, as I'll call it, you know, soap, you know, giving it a flashy name and putting it in a posh bottle with a little label on it, it's still soap. It's like all these thousands of different shampoos you could get with all these different ingredients in. It's soap. Anyway, Dr. Woods, never heard of it. And the first one is tea green. Or was it green tea? I'll put this up on the screen. Initially in this video I'll put the ingredients up, but I'm not going to give you the measurements because they're in American, and we start with 2 quarts of water. What? It's a joke. You not realise the rest of the world is laughing their heads off at you. What the hell's a quart? And you've got 2 of them? Why don't you just say 4 pints? Why don't you just say half a gallon? 2 quarts. It's like going back to the Pilgrim Fathers. And then there's a cup of this. And the cup in America is a different size to everybody else's cup. In fact, I think Australia's got a different size yet again. Who the hell measures things in cups? That's for measuring flour and sugar in baking, not for measuring soap for an insecticide. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the ingredients and I'm going to convert all of the elements of this recipe into millilitres, so that the rest of the world is all on a level playing field and we're all talking the same language and we don't have to look things up in charts and tables. Anyway, so that's one type of soap, comes in a bottle, and it's really thick and gudgy when the guy poured it out. And then there's another type of soap called peppermint. Now this first type of soap really digs in apparently and gets right in and virtually explodes the insects. So it kills the insects, the egg sacs inside them, you know, with things like aphids and that, knocks out spider mites. It seems to do the job. Time will tell. Right, so we've got the 2 types of soap, and then we have a good quantity of rubbing alcohol, isopropyl. Is it isopropyl or isopropane? One of those, rubbing alcohol, 70%. Good dollop of that. Don't forget this is going in 2 quarts of water. So I can't stop laughing, I just find it hysterical. Somebody mixes up a recipe for an insecticide using quartz. Quartz is a gemstone, semi-precious gemstone, I believe. Not a measure of liquid. Well, not in this day and age anyway. So we've added our stuff in, and then the other thing that goes in is hydrogen peroxide. Now the recipe shows that at 1%. Now most people that have got hydrogen peroxide for their orchids have got it at 3%. Well, dilute a bit. You know, it's reasonably easy to work out how to dilute a bit of hydrogen peroxide. Just knock the edge off of the 3% basically. So those are the ingredients. 2 types of this Dr. Woods soap, some alcohol, and some hydrogen peroxide and some water. So that's the ingredients that I was given, and I've got a video showing how to actually mix it up and all that sort of stuff, and it gets applied with a sprayer, and in the demonstration on the video I would have to say very liberally, like drowned the whole plant. The one thing you can say at the end of a drowning like that, it's going to be nice and clean with all that soap in it, isn't it? Yeah, so it's a recipe that this company says they use all the time and it works, but it does take, again, repeat applications, but it does do the job, and you spray the whole thing. Absolutely soak the whole plant in every nook and cranny and crevice, base of the plant, and a good soaking for the top of the media as well. Yeah? Now if there's anything down in the media that survives, it's liable to come up. Now in this demonstration there's a pot with some spider mites on the surface, with just forming the webs on the surface. It gets a spray like that and they start running around and stop. So it appears to work. Now either they stopped because they got out of breath or they were brown bread. It's I was going to say it's a non-toxic recipe, but it isn't really with that amount of alcohol in it. Although diluted in 2 quarts of water, that's not a lot of alcohol, is it? So this would be classed as a soapy wash type thing, but apparently the peppermint is a serious deterrent, really, and it makes your whole grocery spray smell nice, providing you like peppermint. Anyway, it sounds a little comical, but it's not a homemade jobby with somebody in a bedroom, you know, just making something up as they go along that appeared to work on a couple of plants. It has come from a company that's got a reputation to stick to, if you see what I mean. And if you're prepared to put a video on YouTube for your company and it turns out it's a waste of space and it doesn't work, that's going to come straight back in your face, having gone via the YouTube route. So we might have a play with that. I'm not saying I'm doing it right now, but other things on my mind. Anyway, that's that shelf done. I'm just going to shut down because I want to finish that coffee while it's hot, because although I don't mind ordinary coffee getting a bit cold, cold black coffee is not nice. And then I'll be back and we'll have a look at a few more. Let's just have a look at the time, 20 minutes. Plenty of time yet. Right, that's those put away. Coffee drunk. Because I've run out of milk, I'm really low on the caffeine today, because I can drink black coffee if it's proper coffee, but I'm not putting a pot of coffee on mid-morning when I stop drinking it after lunch sort of thing, because I won't finish it, and it's just a waste. Right, over here, we'll have a look at some of these. This may or may not be with me much longer, because I can't get rid of the scale, and it's been there long enough that it's taking the plant down. The plant is weakened now. But we do have a new growth that looks quite strong. So if that can pull through, oh, this is still covered in scale. When we were looking at the Cattleyas, and I said this is their favourite place on a bifoliate, right down in there, around the base of an old flower spike, yes? Yesterday I got a toothpick on one of those that were really tightly infested, and I hooked them all out and spread them out on there, and they were all dead. There wasn't a sign of any movement in there whatsoever. So I think we may be winning the battle and not knowing it, because we keep killing dead ones. I'm going to have to start clearing up the bodies so that I can detect whether there's new ones, because at the moment I think I'm spraying dead ones. Possible. Anyway, this is a black hair type. I've had this one a very long time. It's a very old cross, Formidable, and it's Infundibulum crossed with Lowii. So, you know, 2 of the large whites with the golden yellow orange throat to the lip. I've had it in bloom before now, but I haven't had it in bloom for a while because it's just going downhill. See, now there's the classic. There they are in that leaf joint. Yeah. Now somebody said those look like mealybugs. A lot of the pictures of scale that you will see are pictures of the adults. That's the crawler stage. That's the nymphs, and they're endearingly collectively known as the crawler stage. So that's what you get after the eggs hatch. Yeah. They're mobile. They will move from plant to plant, especially if they hatch out on a plant. Have a little chew and think, ugh, that tastes a bit funny. That tastes like it's got some sort of systemic in it. Let's have a go at this one over here. I'm sure they do that. Anyway, black hair type. Here is another black hair type. This is the big one. Now this one hasn't been repotted yet, but at the moment I see no need. It hasn't got scale. I have a black hair type with no scale. Yay, he says, scanning it. Now, have we had blooms on this one yet? Yes, we have. This is Infundibulum, and we did have blooms on this. We're going to get any more? Doesn't look like it at the moment, but this is the latest growth. This one's pushing up, and it's still growing. It's still got new leaves coming out the top, so it will get a bit taller. But again, these can bloom on older canes. You know, normally you get your first ones out of the top again, and then you'll get some try again later. Did I just say this one hasn't got scale? Yeah, just to make me a liar, I've just found a couple. I was just going to say these are a nuisance because they do not like systemics, but I can't see a soapy wash type thing doing any harm. And if that can clear them, then they should recover. But you know, as I said, I've had one that has scale so long, it's taking the plant down. It will eventually weaken the plant so much. Anyway, this came from Burnham's. Nice looking plant, and not got a Burnham's tag on it. So they obviously had this from as an import, and because they haven't repotted it and didn't sell it while it was in bloom, it's still got the original tag on. But I'm pretty sure that came from Burnham's. I seem to remember when I got out to the checkout, Sarah said, "Whew, that's a good one," as if to say that should have gone in the private collection. And I said, well, why would I choose the not good one? Anyway, that's the black hair type. What's this one? Oh, right. Winter care for black hair type in my environment is exactly the same as the Latorias and the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis type. They're warm growers in the main. They're not going to like the cooler temperatures. They will slow down and or stop, so they'll get very little feed and very little water. Just enough to stop the cane shriveling. And with those three types, they don't get the bright light that I try and give the Nobile types, because they don't need it to induce the blooms. Yeah. Many of those have an annual season, and it will follow on from when they bloomed before, either spring, early summer, or late summer into autumn. It depends. And then we've got an oddity, which is doing very well, thank you very much. This is my Victoria Regina. And for the life of me, I can't remember what section that comes in. And it doesn't matter. Basically, this is my cane. Yeah? So this is what I was given. Again, this came from a split from one of Sarah's specimen plants. She splits them up every now and again and sort of pots them up and sells them on as smaller divisions. But as a division, this growth here is stonking away. Absolutely brilliant. And we've got a pot full of roots, so we've got a successful plant now that I know is the real thing, unlike some of the imposters we've had. I'll have to have a think about what treatment that's going to get for the winter. Just have a look at its temperature ranges and where it comes from. Is it deciduous forest or not? It tells you a lot. So no decision on winter care for that one yet. But it will probably just sit in with the black hair, the Phalaenopsis and the others, even though it's like other. And then we've got an odd one here, because this is my only one. And this is effectively what you would call a Kingianum type, so an Aussie orchid, and it's delicatum, which is a naturally occurring hybrid in the wild, which should be written like that. Lowercase, in italics, with an X in front of it, and I believe it should not have a gap between the X and the name. I think that's how you're supposed to write it, and that tells everybody that it's a hybrid, but it's naturally occurring, so it's closer to a species than a hybrid really. This has never bloomed for me. It may do this time round, but in this case it might not, because it doesn't get cold enough in the winter for this one. This needs to chill right down to get a good blooming on it. But we do have nubbins. We have nubbins. We may get some blooms in the spring. See, I mean, that cane there, you know, those are distinct blooming nubbins. And this latest growth has got them already. This is my new growth for this year, just the one. One's better than none, that's what I always say. But these potentially grow into a bucket full. A friend of mine at the Orchid Society, Bournemouth Orchid Society, he has one that he carries in like that. I remember one year at our show, that comes in the February show, because that's when it blooms, end of winter or towards the end of winter. And he bought it in, and it was stunning. It was a mass of blooms like that. One of the people who would have judged that show walked up and said, "Can you get that out? It's got bugs on it." Look on his face, it was his pride and joy. But you put that on the table with all the other plants, it's not fair on everybody else who's kept their plants clean, is it? So he had to take it out. Poor thing. It'll be back this year, I bet. Bug free with any luck. Anyway, they can grow into an enormous plant. Once they seem to get going, in the right conditions, they chuck up new growths, you know, many new growths, and they like double in size, and then next year they do it again, that sort of thing. But this one's a bit slow going for me because it lacks the coolness, it lacks that chill in the winter. I think Ed's got one of these, and I think it goes in an unheated greenhouse, so potentially that's getting down quite close to zero. You know, when you get a series of cold nights with low daytime temperatures. Anyway, so that's that one. Winter care for this one I can't do properly, but this should have a cold, dry winter rest. And you can see by the shape of the canes, it is designed to go without water for quite long periods. It's fat and sturdy. It's going to take a lot to shrivel these. Yeah. Anyway, so that's that one. That is my only Kingianum type, mainly because I'm not too keen on them. So why have I got this one then? I'll tell you why I've got this one. You know, I've said about my Radiata having one of the strongest fragrances. Not as strong as this one. This is powerful. When my friend brings his plant in to the hall, it fills the hall, not a grow space. People outside in the corridor waiting to come in say, "What's that smell? What's that? That's nice. Is that you?" Not looking at me, obviously. But yeah, very, very, very fragrant, that one. Almost white or white blooms, sometimes pink tinge, not always. So, have we missed any Dendrobium types? Yes, we have. The ones that we've missed are just winter resters, which are many and varied. And I've gone over winter resting so many times, I'm fed up with saying it, quite honestly. But there are people that are joining the channel that might have bought their first one this year and are worried to death about getting it in. Well, it's not getting it into the winter, it's getting it out the other end with hopefully some blooms on. So I'm not going to get loads of them down because they all get the same treatment called the winter rest. With some of them, it's not as harsh a rest as others. So there is some variety in there. But the types of things that are in here are, I haven't got a nosmum anymore, have I? I've got a phyllum. See, now the winter rest for a phyllum doesn't need to be that cool. It would prefer to get a brighter winter rest, and it does need the, you know, off with the food and down with the watering, but it doesn't need to get as cool as some of the others to make it bloom. Probably bloom anyway. A phyllum comes into the same sort of thing. I've got my Nesta, which is a hybrid which includes one of those two, I believe. So the it's gone again. Yeah, a phyllum and the Nesta get the same treatment. They get an increase in light, and everything in here, as I've said, gets a drop in temperature. But then the same treatment gets for these things like Lindleyi, which doesn't look any. Oh, let me just get one that I'm on about. In the main, the ones I was just talking about are what I call long cane Dendrobiums. They tend to be pendulous. They're deciduous. They drop their leaves every year or every year and a half, some of them. Some manage to get 2 years out of a cane, like this one's doing. But this one was covered in kikis. All the kikis have been planted. This is this year's cane. So this is where the blooms will be next year. And I might get an odd bloom on some of these kikis. This one did something very strange. I've always said with this type of Dendrobium, once a cane's bloomed, it will never bloom again. Well, this one proved me a liar, because this was the one that bloomed, and then about 2 months later it put up 2 more blooms at the base of that cane. Strange. So that's what I mean by the long cane ones. They tend to bloom late winter into spring, and they need an increase in light, and they need a drop in temperature, especially at night. It's not quite so important to drop it down in the day, but they need the difference between day and night. That's important. And then this comes into the same set, even though it looks nothing like it. And that's Dendrobium lindleyi. Now, that should be having its water and feed reduced now, because it's stopped growing. It's got no new growths on it whatsoever, and the ones it's got have matured. You can tell when this type mature because the leaf on the new growth is the same colour as the rest of the plant, because when it's new it's not. So that's how you can tell, like, if this was a huge specimen, which is not, you could tell which were the new growths, because they're a lighter and tend to be shinier green. And then as they mature and they've completely finished growing, they change colour to the same as the rest of the plant. So I only got 3 new growths on this year. It's the middle of August now. It's unlikely to start any more new growths now. It's possible, but unlikely. So to all intents and purposes, that's finished growing this year. So what's it going to do with any feed that I give it? Unfortunately, I haven't got the time with my mounts to divide them up into sets. The only 2 sets I've got are those that are resting and those that aren't. Yeah? So the ones that aren't are because it's not winter yet. That's everything. Yeah? So to start reducing the feed for 1 or 2 plants, I can't do it. So that still gets some food. What it's going to do with it, I don't know. But this one needs a drop in temperature, but it doesn't need it to be severe. You could get away with putting that in a cooler room in a house easily, because it doesn't need to drop right down. But it does like an increase in light. Yeah, so cooler, brighter, cut the feed, and really is just resting Dendrobiums. That's what they do. Well, I'd love to be able to get that out, because my Hercoglossam's got some blooms. I might pick the camera up and show you those. Although they're not going to look much, because because there's no light. You know, we've got a dull day, and they light up and almost glow when they get the sun behind them, and you look up through them. They glow. They're gorgeous blooms. Not very big, but absolutely stunning. I love it. And these are late blooms. It's long finished its mass blooming, so it shouldn't really be doing that. And then we've got there's a few other Dendrobiums lurking that I can't get at because they're too far in, without moving others anyway. Oh, I'll stick this in the video in case Marius is watching. This came to the garden party. Again, this originated in Jeff's, but Marius has actually mounted this one. And this was sticking out the top. He was frightened to death that it was going to break, because it was a new growth. Well, it's pushing on nicely now. Starting to open its leaves. There's at least 4 leaves on that cane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It looks like it has 4 leaves. That seems to be its trait. And it's got roots doing quite well. And it's in an unusual type of moss. It's a very, very large, coarse moss. I like that. But I don't remember ever seeing that growing anywhere. So I don't know where it came from. It might not be a native moss. It could have been bought. I don't know. But anyway, it's coming on. And what is that? I've forgotten, and it hasn't got a tag on it, so you're not going to find out. I do know what it is. It's in my notes, but I can't actually recall what it is. But yeah, that Marius brought that to the garden party for me. So, and I still have to go careful with that new growth, not to knock it. It's not. I call it set. There comes a point where a new growth is set, and it's as strong and rigid as the rest of the plant. Then you can knock them about a bit and get away with it. But while they're still a bit bendy and a bit fragile, go careful. Otherwise, you know, especially if you're on a plant that only tends to grow 1 new growth a year, you'll cuss if you knock it off, won't you, and break it. Yeah, so Dendrobiums, and some hints at the sort of winter care. Although we're not there yet. For goodness sake, don't start yet. Most Dendrobiums are in full growth at the moment. Some may be heading up to maturing their canes. Some may even have some that have already matured and may have some more pushing on. They can be in all sorts of stages at this time of year. And even like my Lindleyi, which is not a mature plant by any means, it's finished growing for the season. It did all its growing really quickly earlier in the year, and finished it with nice big fat canes, you know, with full-size leaves. So it's done its job. But yeah, I like Lindleyi. It's a relatively new acquisition. I've always had Jenkinsii, which is like a baby version of that, much smaller canes and leaves. And similar size flowers, they do have a similarity, the blooms. So on the Jenkinsii, the blooms look really big for the size of the canes. But you don't get that many on a spike, whereas on Lindleyi, you get large spikes with many blooms on. So but the blooms are relatively small compared with the canes when you look at Jenkinsii. So yeah, the only new bloom now, I'm going to leave this down for a while. This Vanda Hannah got me some considerable time ago, and it had a problem that I couldn't solve. Now it's been solved, but the damage that was done can never be repaired, unfortunately. It started getting spots on it, and I couldn't work out what was wrong. I investigated, no bugs anywhere. First thing I did was spray it with a fungicide, because obviously that is an infection. What you can see is an infection, but that wasn't the cause. The cause was tiny little bugs that were too small to see with the naked eye. I had to get my magnifying glass out, and it was covered in them. Now I don't know what they were, but two types of spider mites. You've got red spider mite, which everybody knows and understands, and you can see them. Well, she's got very poor eyesight. But there's another type that's a more sort of greyish colour. And that video I was on about with this, you know, what seems like a homemade soapy wash mix, that was the type of spider mites on that video, and they weren't that visible. They were pretty damn small. So that could have been what got on here. How they got in here I don't know, and they weren't on any other plant because there's no damage like this anywhere else. Anyway, so eventually it had a bug spray and killed them all off. And the new leaves are coming out nicely. So it sort of stopped it, I think. And it's got a little kiki coming on down here as well, which also sort of looks okay. The idea is that one day this kiki will cover up this manky bit at the bottom. It might even replace the manky bit one day. But anyway, this has just opened, and we have got two spikes on the go at the same time. So we've got a second spike coming on here. Nicely tightly clustered blooms. So this is a Vanda crossed with a Ascocentrum, and that's where the tightly clustered smaller blooms comes from, that side of the hybrid. I've got no real name for this, but it is highly likely it's Orange Delight. And that would be an Ascocentra. But I think all of the Ascocentra, oh, I'm going to get my mouth tied up. The other sort have been reclassified as Vandas now, so it's basically a Vanda hybrid. And I've left it down here, because this, obviously being a Vanda, likes bright light to induce the blooms. It's got the blooms now. It doesn't need the bright light anymore. Not until the blooms are over, then it can go back up again. So I brought that down so that I can see it from in the house. So that's that one. And that'll do for today. As I say, it is Saturday, lunchtime-ish. Hey, it's lunchtime. I should be eating, and I'm not. And by the time I've processed this and got it done, it's going to get posted quite late on what is UK Saturday, so that quite a lot of people will still end up viewing it on Sunday, because there's not going to be any videos tomorrow. Obviously I'm on the coach trip. Let's hope I don't get a dreaded phone call halfway through that day. Yeah, so whatever I film at Burnham's tomorrow, I will put together for Monday, so that'll be Monday's video. feeling I've got a care collab, or is that next Monday? I can't remember. Anyway, so there'll be some film of stuff in bloom at Burnham's while I'm there. And then the next time I'm at Burnham's is the Devon Orchid Society show, at which there will be quite a few orchid societies with displays, plus other traders besides Burnham's plants. So in the main, I will concentrate on filming stuff that's not Burnham's, if you see what I mean, and concentrate on the other stuff. But that's out into September, that is, so not yet. Yeah, so thanks for dropping by. We'll stick the bit on the end because it's Sunday. If you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron, where you'll get videos and different ideas than the main channel. For instance, you'll get this one without any ads, which several people have said it's very nice to watch the longer video with no ads at all. So this one will go across as a no ad version for the patrons. That's like a membership thing. You subscribe to be a member and pay an amount a month, which helps the channel. That's going to help me maintain this lot during and after the move, whenever that is. It's going to come soon, I'm sure. Well, relatively soon. Also, there's the option to buy me a coffee. It's a site that's been set up to just leave a one-off small donation, like a tip. You know, I mean, there are people that watch every single video I do, but every now and again there must be one that just stands out to that individual. So you sort of think, that was a good one, that was useful to me, I'll leave a tip. So those are the two, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. And on my main homepage, they are little buttons in the banner, but they are also links in the description of every video. And like I've always said, if you like watching and you're not subscribed, it's very useful to grow the channel to subscribe. Costs nothing, helps YouTube view the channel better. As the subscribers grow, YouTube thinks, we'll push that one a bit higher up in the searches because it's on the move. And when you've got a monetized channel, the bigger it gets, the more money YouTube make. So they're quite happy to promote those channels a bit more than perhaps those that are not moving very much. It makes it very difficult to start out in YouTube nowadays. So much competition. So if you're not subscribed, it would be nice. And a little bit of help that's easy to do is just watch the ads. All the ads on my channel are skippable. If it's a short advert, less than 30 seconds, you need to watch it all or nobody gets paid. And if it's longer than 30 seconds, getting just beyond that 30-second mark, the creators get paid. This is for all channels, this is not just for me, this is how YouTube works. However, on those longer adverts, quite a bit more money is paid to the creator if the ad is watched in full. Don't waste your life watching adverts. In my book, a bit more than 30 seconds to click over that point is enough. Skip out. There's some ads on YouTube that are like 40 minutes long. Don't waste your life, please. Anyway, so that's that. Thanks for dropping by. We've had the news at the beginning, and that recipe, you'll have had that as a pop-up. And as I said, I will make a video. What I might do is get the ingredients. I mean, two of them I've already got. Actually buy those two soapy things, if I can find somewhere that sells them. Some hippie shop down the high street that you smell before you get there with all those remedies and all that sort of stuff, you know. Anyway, if I can find those two soaps, I might get them, and then I can actually do a video actually with measurements, universal measurements, and mix it all up, and then we'll try it and see if it actually works. But it has to be mixed up fresh. It's another one of those. But I wouldn't be mixing 2 quarts, would I? I'd probably mix a litre. So the amount of ingredients going in a litre is going to be quite small. So, but we shall see. Hopefully I'll do that down the line a bit, maybe. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.